Hello there and welcome back to Seagulls Central. Thank you so much for tuning into this video. Today we are going to be playing keep, sell, loan with every single Brighton player in the Brighton squad going forward. I'm not going to include new signings because I'm figuring that all the new signings we've brought in so far we're probably going to be having as part of first team football. I'm mainly going to be going on the players that we used last season in the Premier League, every single player who made an appearance last season, and we're going to be assessing essentially their future and where they stand. As always, thank you so much for clicking on this video, getting involved in the channel. If you haven't already, please hit that subscribe button. I've seen the stats. There are 75% of people watching this channel haven't subscribed. So if you haven't subscribed, please hit it. Honestly, I need to say it early just so you know I don't forget, because I do kind of tend to forget these things. But it really helps me, like genuinely, just you hitting one button helps me so much with this channel. So I would really, really appreciate it. Right, no more build-up, no more waffling from me. I've got a tendency to do that. Let's get straight into the action and start ranking Brighton players. So we got our setup here. Every single Brighton player's made an appearance. Hopefully I've not forgotten a few. I've seen I've actually accidentally got a few duplicates here, so it could all get a bit messy. But we're going to try and go through everyone and see basically kind of where their future lies. Because I do think, we spoke about it a lot last season. It was a bit of a transitionary season. It was a bit of a transitionary side and squad that we had in terms of also having a new manager and young players. And I think this summer is a real nice stock take for the club because we've had lots of players come in for big money. But we're now in a position where actually we've got a slightly more mature squad, but we've still got a bit of a mix of young players, and some players haven't had as much action as they'd have liked. And we've brought some pretty big new signings in, so it's kind of about working out, where we're going to take some of these players going forward. So let's get into it. Let's pick a random player. You know what? I'm just going to start with some of the ones where I think we can kind of be pretty sure of what they're going to be doing. Start with someone like Jason Steele. I think he's going to be kept. He's obviously going to be kept on for another year or so as the kind of second or third choice goalkeeper supporting Bart Verbruggen. A massively, good servant for the club. Did so well under De Zerbi in those first few seasons that De Zerbi was at the club. His role is pretty defined. Where should we go next? Joel Veltman. Obviously, we're going to keep him. Massive servant for the club. Obviously a bargain, maturity, shows leadership, versatility. I think we're a poorer side when he's not in the squad, to be honest. I've said it for a while. I always feel better when he is in our side. One thing I do think that will be quite interesting about Joel Veltman next season is if we do move to playing a three at the back, obviously having brought in Coppola and Olivia Buscagli, players who I think are kind of priming us up to play in a back three. Where does that leave Joel Veltman? Obviously someone who himself is perfectly capable of playing at maybe the right side of a back three, but he's not a wing back, is he? And I think we do have problems around wing backs, going forward in this squad. Obviously Ferdy Kadioglu can clearly play on the left, but I think if we're being honest around what we do on the right hand side, I think it's a little bit more difficult. Obviously I think that suggests why we've kind of maybe signed on someone like Tariq Lamptey for another season to kind of help us in that position. But I think with Joel Veltman, there's no doubt he's going to have a role to play next season, despite having brought in lots of options at centre half. I think that kind of ball playing ability that he has as well and comfortability in a back three really primes him up nicely to playing in this side next season. Lewis Dunk, absolutely, he's going to be kept. There's no doubt about it. Obviously, his minutes next season might be compromised a little bit, just in the sense we have brought in a lot of defenders, and we haven't seen the very, very best of Lewis Dunk in recent months. Obviously, the season that we got into Europe, he was so magnificent. He's perhaps not quite at that level again, but the leadership, the ball playing ability, sitting in the middle of a three, I think he would be absolutely fantastic. We've actually got so many options. Buscagli, left of a three, middle of a three. Coppola, middle of a three, right of a three. Van Hecke, right of a three. Dunk, middle of a three, right of a three. Veltman, right of a three. Igor, left of a three. Cashin, left of... there's actually almost... there are too many options there. But I think we had like Coppola, Buscagli, Van Hecke, Dunk, maybe like another one, Webster, and then we kind of see where the rest go. I think that would be kind of a good setup for us next season. To absolutely keep Lewis Dunk. I think he's perhaps going to have to be a bit more comfortable with having a bit of a reduced role next season, but I think he's probably prepared for that. If he can play kind of 20 Premier League games next season, 30 Premier League games, I think that's a great result for him at his age. And a player who can absolutely still do a job for us in the Premier League. Let's move on to another player. Milner, clearly going to be kept. Obviously signed that contract extension in the last few days. Fabian Hertz is speaking about the importance of James Milner. and the leadership he brings. I think, he was obviously one of those kind of culture signings that we brought in alongside someone like Adam Lallana, Danny Welbeck, the ones who have experience at the top level, experience winning trophies, who can bring that kind of culture into our squad. Obviously, his role next season is going to be a lot more limited, but I think there's no doubt that we've got to keep him. Loaning or selling. I think there was perhaps an argument that we could have just let him go. Perhaps we could have used him more as a coach, but I think he's probably got his eye on that Premier League appearance record, obviously not that far off Gareth Barry. If he had a decent season, played like 15, 20 Premier League games, it's probably not going to happen, but it's not beyond the realms of possibility that could happen. That's definitely why he's going to carry on playing at the top level. And we're going to keep him. He's going to have a small part to play, I'd imagine, next season. But again, he's a player who has in the past played right wing back. Don't think he's quite got the legs anymore. But I wouldn't be surprised if during an injury crisis next season we did see him there. So I think that'll be interesting. Let's go with next Tariq Lamptey. Definitely a keep for me. Obviously signed that contract a few days ago. I think if he'd had my opinion on what we'd have done with him generally, I think I probably would have said we should have let him go at the end of this because his contract technically was up this summer. I think we triggered an option to extend. But if it were me, I do think it's about time he perhaps had moved on from Tariq Lamptey. I think, however, the game-changing element of it for me, which is why I've put him in keep, is the fact that I think we're going to be playing a back three next season, and our options at wing-backs are slightly limited in terms of conventional wing-backs, and I think Lamptey is actually the perfect player for that. A player who perhaps isn't the greatest defensively, but actually with that pace and with that attacking ability. We've seen Lamptey, some of his best performances this season be when he's come on and played on the right wing. And I think that's probably why they think, we'll give him another year. And actually it's a good opportunity for us to be able to, he might not be our ideal pick for that right wing back slot, but if we're going to play that way, we've actually got a player whose profile is perfect for that already, so we'd be silly not to use it. I think that's realistically what's going to happen with him. So, obviously, there's players like Jack Hinshelwood who can play there, Ferdy Kadioglu. There are options. Minteh could probably play right wing back as well, but I think we've got to keep him just because of the fact that I think it's too good an opportunity if we're going to play that role to not have a player like him in the squad. Generally, I am a bit sick of the whole kind of he comes on, he has 3 great matches, then he gets injured for 10 matches, then we don't see him for ages, then he comes back, he puts, I don't think he offers enough to warrant that kind of role in the squad. He's not a world beater. However, clearly very popular, probably quite an easy deal to do is keeping on, him on for another year with the contract extension. It kind of makes sense for everyone, really, doesn't it? Okay, let's go. Let's try and actually put someone else in a different category. Let's go with Carl Rushworth. Interesting one with Carl Rushworth. If it were me and I was Carl Rushworth, I probably would be looking to get out, and I think I would love to keep him. I would love to have him in the keep category. He's clearly one of England's brightest talents when it comes to goalkeepers, along with obviously James Beadle, who we've also got at the club. However, for him now, 23, 24 years old, played a decent amount of EFL football, he's not getting into this Brighton side, is he? Let's just be completely honest. Bart Verbruggen is the number one choice. Even if he were to leave next summer, would Carl Rushworth be the player that we'd immediately bring through? I actually don't know. I'd imagine we'd maybe go out into the market to get another goalkeeper. I also imagine maybe James Beadle would be given that opportunity in like a year, 2 years' time. Carl Rushworth, perhaps he just doesn't see his future with Brighton anymore. The good thing for him, I suppose, on a personal level is the fact that he's a British talent, and for that homegrown quota, lots of Premier League clubs will find that quite attractive. And there are lots of clubs out there who are looking for goalkeepers. You think of Leeds looking for a goalkeeper. I think Man United also have been linked, looking to at least bring in a backup goalkeeper to support their kind of goalkeeping structure, with Tom Heaton leaving the club. I think he will leave, and if I were him, I would leave. And to be honest, if I were the club, I would sell him. Looks like a very good talent, but I think we've got so many top talents in the goalkeeping department at the moment. And in my opinion, we've got a very, very good goalkeeper at the moment in Bart Verbruggen. I would sadly say that it's probably Carl Rushworth's time to leave the club. And if I were him, I think that is the right decision for him. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you think we should be promoting him to first team football now, and actually, Bart Verbruggen's not done enough. I take that point. I do take that, but it's a tough one. It is really tough. Right, let's move on. God, we've got so many duplicates here, don't we? It's ridiculous. Let's go with Igor. I think Igor's a bit of a tough one, If it were me, I really like Igor. And I think what Igor's done in the last couple of seasons has been really, really admirable. He's come in in a difficult period. Obviously, last season when we were in Europe, came in, had quite a difficult debut, I remember. And then last season has had to fill in gaps in the team whenever we needed it. I think he's conducted himself really, really well. Generally never put a foot wrong. Maybe, he looks a bit clunky and a bit awkward at times in terms of the way he plays, but he's built like an absolute brick house, isn't he? He's got a decent touch. He's a decent ball player. He can play through the lines. He can dribble well. But I think maybe he's not quite at that level that we need for a player that if we are trying to maybe break into the top 6 or top 7 or 8, I think maybe he is more of like a mid to upper table Premier League player. And if it weren't for the sheer depth of centre-backs that I think we've got this coming season, I'd say absolutely keep him as an option. But I think for him, you've heard reports about his future. I think he'll be looking to maybe get into a European side who are playing in kind of, the Europa League, the Conference League. I think there'd be a lot of interest in him. Perhaps another Premier League side as well. If it were me, I would sell Igor purely just because I think we have so many options, too many options to the point where I don't think we can actually justify having that many centre-backs. And if you're going to move on one or the other, I think it's going to have to be him and perhaps one other. Maybe that sounds a bit harsh. You can't really say a bad word about the guy. It's not that he's not good enough or anything. But I think when you've got so many options and you're clearly going to use these players that you've brought in for big money with European experience, prospects such as Coppola, and obviously great players like Buscagli, Dunk, Van Hecke, it's a difficult one. So for me, I would sell Igor this summer. Right, well, let's crack on to a few more. Let's go with Danny Welbeck. Absolutely, for me, Danny Welbeck, we're keeping him. I'd be interested to know how many more seasons we have of Danny Welbeck. Would this maybe be his last season before we'd maybe move on from him? Because we've got a lot of strikers currently at the club going into next season. I think the way we assess that situation is going to be really interesting. Ferguson, Costilas, Seamas, Welbeck, Pedro. There are lots of options right now, and obviously a few are going to drop away. But, how many more seasons does he have? If it were me, I'd happily give him like another 2 years. I think the experience he brings, I think we saw towards the end of the season, that sheer quality that he offers. So for me, it's no doubt that we've got to keep Danny Welbeck. Let's go Ferdy Kadioglu. I think, there's no doubt he's not going to be alone, is he? We're going to keep him. And I think next season, when he's back from this injury, he has a full pre-season under his belt with the club. Obviously, he came in quite late, once the season had already started for Brighton. And we can really see him in pre-season under this new Fabian Hurzeler system. I think we're going to see the best of him next season. Clearly a fantastic talent, a player who can score goals, who can get up and down. I want to see us get value for money out of this guy because he's clearly an excellent talent. But he's just had a rough season. So for me, there's no doubt about it. We're going to keep him. Let's move on to another player. Let's go with Adam Webster. Adam Webster, interesting. What would you do about Adam Webster? Because there's an argument you could sell him, isn't it, really? You could argue that we've had a good, 5-6 years of service out of him. He is going to have a lot of competition this season. Coppola, Buscagli, Dunk, Van Hecke. Cash in maybe. Igor. Are we going to have to let a couple of them go? Are we going to have to sell him? Could he maybe go to a promoted side? Could he maybe go to the upper end of the Championship? He could definitely still play in the Premier League. We saw his performances to the end of last season. How good they were. But I'm going to keep him. I think you've got to keep him in this squad. I think there are other options that you can let go. There are other options that you could maybe send out on loan or sell. And I think the personality that he has, the relationships that he has in this squad, the leadership role he's taken on, and the performances he puts in, I think he's a player who will keep. Yes, he will be third, fourth choice. Yes, he will maybe only play 15, 20 games next season, maybe substitute appearances. But I think what we saw last season was his importance when we need to rely on him in those big moments. In the periods where we've lost Dunk, where we've lost Van Hecke through suspension, he's stepped in fantastically alongside Igor. But I think if I'm going to pick one out of the two of them to stay, I probably would pick Webster over Igor. I'd love to know what you think. If you think I've got the wrong call there, I think that would be what I would do. So yeah, interesting. Let me know. Have I made the right call there? Let's crack on. Let's move on to Diego Gomez. What do we do about Diego Gomez? Diego Gomez obviously came in January, played half a season, looked brilliant. Not played every game, had to come in, come out. Yes, and Ayari ahead of him at times. Jack Hinshelwood, Weaver towards the end of the season, playing a bit as well. But he's a player who looks excellent, a goal scorer, gets up and down, a real conventional kind of box-to-box player. For me, absolutely keep. He's going to be one of the main players. If it were me, managing this side, he'd be a player that I'd be building my best team around. I think he's got so much to his armoury. I think the way he can score goals, the way he can intercept, the way he can tackle, the way he can set the tone of the play, the intensity he plays with, I love it. I love it so much. So absolutely, I'm going to be keeping Diego Gomez. We've got Freddie Kadioglu still here. We've got 2 Matt O'Reillys, for God's sake. Have we got 2? I feel like we've got 2 Rutters as well. Am I making that up? I feel like there were 2 Rutters. Maybe not. Where should we go next? Let's go Jack Hinshelwood. Jack Hinshelwood, absolutely keeping him. Another player who I think is going to push on next season. Hopefully going to have a really good under-21s Euros with England as well this summer. I actually made a shout that I think he could be in the 26-man squad for the World Cup next summer. You just think an outside shot, given injuries, whatever could happen. A guy playing, every game for the under-21s, playing every week in the Premier League. Versatile, can play different positions. I think there's an outside shout. If you could put a bet on, maybe that would be one I would do. But yeah, Jack Hinshelwood, top player, versatile, came in clutch so many times last season. I think we're going to see the best of him next season. Hopefully we will see him in centre mid, but I wouldn't be surprised if we have to rely on a right wing back. I think, he's shown that he can do that, and I think Fabian Hurzeler clearly has that in mind for him. But absolutely keep, no doubt about it. Tom McGill, if you were him, it's tough. I'll be honest, I don't really care, and I know that sounds a bit brutal. I think he's one of those players who clearly has a role to play, but if we sold him, wouldn't be that bothered. If we loaned him, he probably needs a loan, let's be honest. Like, he went out on MK Dons to MK Dons for the first half of the season, did pretty well. We obviously recalled him after having our goalkeeping kind of injury troubles around January time. What would I do? Is there like an I don't care box? I know that sounds really rude, but just keep him just because, no, you know what? Let's loan him. He needs a loan. He's like 25 now, 26. He needs to go out and start playing first team football regularly. We'd have Jason Steele, we'd have Bart Verbruggen. We could bring in James Beadle as well to support that. And I think, to be honest, we'll sell Carl Rushworth and probably loan out Tom McGill. I reckon that'll be what we do. And I completely understand that. Matt O'Reilly, I hope, for God's sake, that we keep Matt O'Reilly. I will not be surprised, however, if there's a lot more talk going throughout this window around his future. Obviously, he's made those comments about wanting to play in a different position at times next season, how he spoke about how he wanted to play the number 8 a little bit more. For me, he's really got a role to play. It just shows how many players we've got. And I think it's going to be interesting towards the end of this how many players I say keep to, because if I've not said enough to loan and sell, I'm going to have to, at the end, make some revisions to this, because we have so much competition next season, and he's going to be a player who's going to be fighting for places so often. Every week he's going to be struggling to get in this side. And I think our midfielders are going to have to do so well to pin down their places with the options that we've got. I really like him. I don't want to see him go after one season of Premier League football. I think he's a player who can score goals, who can set the tempo for us. But I think in his situation, would he be wanting more guaranteed minutes in a top 5 European league? Perhaps he would, but I think this is a great opportunity for him, for a team who could potentially try and do special things next season. I think it would be a silly opportunity for him to waste it. If I were the club, I'd be absolutely wanting to keep him. But I think if there's decent money that comes in for him, look, if you get like a 30, 40 million pound bid for him, maybe you take that and make a bit of money on a player that brought in only a year ago. I think it's interesting. Right, where should we go next? Let's go with Jan-Paul van Hekke. Absolutely keep. Our player of the season last season. He's one of those players who we'd be lucky to keep. And I think it's really interesting. You weirdly, touch wood, you haven't heard much talk around teams wanting to come in and get him. If I was an Arsenal, if I was a Man United, if I was even a Tottenham, I'd be looking at him so much. I'd be so keen on signing him. A leader, playing for his national side, can play the ball out of into midfield, can pass brilliantly, last-ditch tackles. He literally has everything you need, and he can play in different systems. And I think if we still have him at the end of this summer transfer window, we are going to look like some defensive force next season in terms of the options we have. With him playing every game, an absolute baller, brilliant footballer, fantastic defender. I really hope we keep him. Where should we go next? Let's go Matt Tweefer. Again, a player who really showed his best only towards the end of the season, struggling to get in, had a difficult start to the season, I think probably struggled to settle. What would I do with him? I wouldn't loan him despite putting him there. You've got to absolutely keep him. I think you've seen the quality he has. You could imagine him and O'Reilly in a midfield 2 together next season as part of a kind of 3-4-3 kind of system. a brilliant player, loads of time on the ball. I think he needs to get a little bit, he had to get a little bit better at kind of getting up to the speed of the Premier League, but I think we ended up seeing that towards the end of the season. A player who has the size, the physicality, the presence, and I'm hoping he's going to be a player we see the best of next season, so absolutely keep him. Gruder, now this is interesting. I think if you'd asked me at Christmas about him, I would have said loan. A player who looked fantastic but couldn't really get in the side, and you maybe thought to yourself, you know what, he doesn't look like he's actually the perfect player for us kind of going forward. Maybe not the perfect player for the Premier League, but I think after what we've seen this season, he's absolutely got to be kept. Fantastic touch, fantastic feet, can make chances, can score goals, can run at players, can dribble. I think, again, he'll be one of those players who'll be fantastic in a kind of wide forward position, playing off the wide left or the wide right. I'm really excited to see what he can do. I think he's versatile as well. Absolutely, we've got to keep him. Okay, let's crack on. There's a lot to get through. I'm going to have to maybe go a bit quicker now. Right, let's go Bart Verbruggen. Absolutely, for me, he's our number one choice next season. He's a player who I think we saw improve a little bit. I saw actually a stat the other day about how he was the worst shot stopper in the Premier League last season. I think that says a lot about how well we probably did to actually finish where we did, despite having someone in goal who is the worst shot stopper. However, I do see a lot in him that I like. Despite that stat, I actually really think shot stopping is one of his strengths. I don't think that ball playing is necessarily his strength from what I've seen. I know he would probably say that is. I think the club would have probably said that is his strength. Is why we signed him. However, I always felt a bit nervous seeing him on the ball. However, I do think he made some massively important saves at times last season, particularly towards the end of the season. He's a player who we've absolutely got to keep. There's got to be no question around that. Bart Verbruggen, we're going to keep him. Yesen Ayeri obviously had loans with Brighton, but a player who we're going to keep next season. Fabian Hurzeler loves him, doesn't he? He plays him. I've always said, if Yesen Ayeri is available to be picked, you will see Fabian Hurzeler picking him. A player who we're again seeing the best of. It'll be interesting to see which ones push on and which ones don't. He looks like a player who came into his own. I think he needs to be a little bit more physical. I think he needs to be a little bit more maybe sharp in some of his tackling sometimes. I think we're going to keep him. I would keep him. He's a great option. I probably wouldn't rely on him as much as I'd like to, maybe with a Baleba or a Matt Tuifa, etc., etc. But, a top player who absolutely we're going to keep and is hopefully going to be a big asset next season. Let's move on to... Have I already put Solly March in? No, I haven't. Solly March... Interesting with Solly March, really. I mean, I think with the options that we've got, you could make an argument to say that if a good deal came in for Solly March, would we let him go? We didn't really see any of him last season. He looked very good, but actually with the age and profile that he's at, could we upgrade on Solly March? Do we already have upgrades on Solly March? And if you're trying to trim a squad, do you think, gosh, maybe we should sell him? I think I would keep him just because I think he's an important part of the dressing room, important part of the squad. However, I think more widely with Solly March, I'd be interested to know where we look with him in kind of a year's time when his contract's up, what his situation would be looking like. I think we probably would see him maybe run it out, maybe give him a year option and then maybe sell him on. Give him one more season to kind of see how he comes back. It's a difficult one because there's no suggestion to say that he's not been a good enough player. He still looks excellent, but we've just got so many options now, and I think we do need to trim this squad a little bit. So it's a bit tough in that sense. I've already put Ferdy in. I've already put Matt O'Reilly in. Let's go with Simona Dingra. Sadly for Simona Dingra, I think we're going to have to put him in the sell category. A player who I do feel really bad for, because at the end of the day, I think last season he was fantastic. When we needed to rely on him every week in and week out, him, players like Buonanotte, when we had loads of injuries last season, when we were playing in Europe, he was brilliant. He came up in big moments, scored some fantastic goals, really direct, really pacey, clearly a very, very good Premier League player. And if I were a team like Sunderland, I know that he's been linked to Sunderland, I would be buying a player like Simona Dingra. I think for us right now, he doesn't quite suit our system. I think we often see him on the right when really he's a left winger. We've obviously got Mitoma there. Is he good to dislodge Mitoma? Probably not. But he's a fantastic player, obviously winning AFCON Player of the Year, at the club whilst he's at the club. It's a real shame, but I think if you're looking to trim the squad with all the options we've got, he's not going to be happy with the game time he's been offered last season. I think he will look to move on. Clearly a great personality, got great attitude, but sadly I would be saying thank you so much, Simon Adingra. An absolute asset for whoever gets you, but I think I will be selling him. Let's then move on to... That's Carlos Baleba, isn't it? Absolutely, Carlos Baleba. We've got to keep him, our best player last season. If we can try and hang on to him for one more season, oh my God, that would be such a result. I'm saying keep him as though we have a choice in it. I think we're going to struggle to keep him. I would be shocked if there wasn't a play made for him this summer. It's going to be record money to get him out of Brighton. The only thing is I do think a lot of the top clubs have their midfields kind of sorted out now. Obviously Arsenal bringing in Zubimendi, Man City with Reinders, Liverpool obviously doing what Liverpool do last season, clearly having an excellent midfield that's ready to go. Man United perhaps, but it's going to take big money. I think it's kind of Chelsea obviously having such a stacked midfield as well. I think in terms of the Premier League, I can't see who would come in and get him. Maybe we would get one more season out of him and then kind of assess things from there. But a top player and one that we've absolutely got to keep. Harry Howell, I think I'd love to see Harry Howell in the first team next season. However, I think for a player of his age, 16, 17, 18, I think we're going to have to loan him out. Obviously a fantastic player for the England under-21s, for our under-21s as well, but he's at that age where actually he could do the old Ben White thing and go to like League 2, League 1 Championship loan, still be really young, come into our side, do really well, and then see where it takes him. I think we'll probably see him maybe go to the Championship or League 1 and get a loan there. He's clearly ready for men's first team football. We saw him in the Premier League, I think it was against Liverpool in the last home game. Looked so bright, looked brilliant, was a part of that Jack Hinchelwood goal that we scored. Was that the Newcastle game or the Liverpool game? But he looked really lively. A player who I'd love to see in the first team, but ultimately we just have too many options, and I think we will see him go out on loan. I think that's probably the right decision. Aaron Cashin, I feel really bad for Aaron Cashin. It kind of feels like the move from hell for him, just one that never really worked out. Brought in the January transfer window and ultimately wasn't given enough game time to kind of prove himself. Clearly in training, if we're being brutal, hasn't shown that he's up to the level for Fabian Hurzeler to want to trust to use him in the Premier League. I obviously saw him. We all saw him in that home game against Aston Villa where he came on, got spun by Rashford, spun by Asensio, looked to kind of fish out of water a little bit. And then we haven't really seen much of him since then, if any of him. And with these signings that we're bringing in, Coppola, Buscagli, it's going to be so tough for him. I'd be shocked if we sold him 6 months after buying him. But if we're being honest, I think he's going to get a loan to the Championship, maybe to a bottom half Premier League side. It's been a pretty poor move from him. I'm not necessarily going to say it's been a bad move from the club, but it's one that doesn't really make sense. I think the way you would justify it is that Brighton see opportunities in the market, and even if they necessarily don't need players, you kind of think, this could be a player who could have good resale value at 10 million quid, one of the best defenders in the Championship, a bright English talent. Do you just get him on your books to kind of see what happens? And I think maybe that was a case of that. And I think it's difficult for him. He can say he's a Premier League player now. It kind of makes his position a little bit stronger in going out and getting other clubs. But I think we will loan him next season. And I think it's a little bit tough for him, that. Okay, well, let's carry on. What I've just quickly done is added in some players who I hadn't originally added in. So forgive me that it all looks a bit weird, but I'd forgotten that there were like loan players that I hadn't included, which is silly of me. So let's move. I'll actually move on to some of them. Let's go with like Ibrahim Osman. I think this is an interesting one because obviously signed for big money last summer, but we haven't seen a minute of him play in a competitive game. Obviously saw him in last pre-season in the Japan tour. Looked like a very good player, but was pretty early on sent out on loan. I think it's weird. I think it'll be another one where we might bring him in for pre-season and then he might get a loan again. It sounds like he didn't have like the best season, was in and out of the side. However, I think with all the attacking options we've got, it's quite tough for him to come in and necessarily get a space. Maybe in a situation where we lost someone like Mitoma, maybe we would then see kind of him come in, him and Tommy Watson maybe competing for that left-hand side position. I think if we keep the squad that we've got and we don't have any major departures, I would probably say loan again, and then he maybe comes back after another year and is ready for first team football, maybe when the squad's in a slightly different place. But when I'm looking at it now, I don't think he's a player who's maybe ready to come in, not from necessarily a quality point of view, but more from a kind of competition for players' point of view. I think we're going to have way too many players. Kel Sherpen, I think we will probably, we might see him come along and maybe support Bart Verbruggen as the number 2 goalkeeper, maybe leaving kind of Beadle in the under-21s. I think if it were me, I'd probably sell him now. He's been at the club for a good few years now, hasn't played very much at all, has been out on quite a few loans, and I think now we're probably going to see him move on permanently, and I think that is the right decision for his future. Similarly with Abdullah Sima, I know he obviously signed that contract extension. He's extended for another 1 year. I think realistically, we're probably going to see him sold this summer as well. A player who did sign a few years ago for decent money, but again, hasn't played in the Premier League, hasn't played domestically for us. We've only ever seen him in pre-season, a player who looks good in pre-season, but I don't necessarily think he's a Fabian hurzeler kind of striker. And I think with all of the options that we've brought in this summer, and the kind of quality and the price point that we bought players in, I'd be really shocked. Look, he could go out on loan again. I know there's talk of Rangers wanting him back. I think we're going to sell him. If it were me, I'd move on from him, sell him, try and make a profit on a player who does look pretty decent. But it's a shame for him. But I suppose that's the model of the club. Like, you buy players, some of them you sell on for big money, some of them you just sell on for a bit of a profit, and that's the kind of, the way the club's run, and not everything has to be a smash hit. For every, Carlos Baleba or Moises Caicedo, there's a few of these kind of guys. And I think it's fair enough, provided that you kind of make decent money on them and get your value for money on them. Let's move on to Jorginho Rutter. I'm shocked I haven't put him in already. He's absolutely a keep for me. Until his injury towards the end of the season, he was probably my player of the season. I thought he was a talisman. I thought he summed up the way we played so well. And I think next season, obviously we've got to keep him. There'll be a real fight to keep him, because I think maybe this time next year there'll be a real competition for his signature, a young player who can change the game, by himself, who can set the tone for the way that we attack, who encapsulates the vibes of a team, can score goals, can create goals, who can dribble past players. Absolutely, you've got to keep him. There's no chance he's going to be loaned or sold unless massive money comes in for him. Pervis Estupiñán, it's a weird one with him. Obviously, him speaking after the Ecuadorian matches that he played a few days ago, around how he's spoken to the club about his desire to move on. Obviously, I spoke about this in a previous video. If you haven't already watched that, go back onto my channel and watch that video. I go into this one in a bit more detail and kind of look at his options and, why he'd make those comments and what he should do. If it were me, I think, given everything that's happened, I think selling him is the right move. We could probably get a good wedge of money for him. He's not like a critical player in terms of really feeling the loss of him. I think we've got options that we can use there, and I think a left-back is a bit more replaceable, and maybe in an era where we're changing the way we play a little bit, it's not a bad time for a player who's 27, 28 as well, coming into the prime of his career. I think we can get good money for him. He's been a fantastic servant, but with everything on the table, I probably would sell him. Let's go to Yankuba Minteh. A brilliant first season for him. We've absolutely got to keep him. I think he's going to be an integral part of the attacking side that Fabian hurzeler puts out next season. I think we're going to see him play most games for us next season. He's going to be the one that's starting, obviously on that right-hand side, looking so brilliant last season, and he's just going to kick on and do so well again, you would hope. Lots of these, already done him, not done you yet. I will go with Kaoru Mitoma. We've absolutely got to try and keep Kaoru Mitoma. In my opinion, one of our most important players, and particularly for the way we attack, such a crucial player. There are so few players like him out there. And I think, yes, Bayern Munich look like they're interested. Maybe Saudi Arabia will come back and show interest in him again. But we've got to do everything we can to try and keep this guy. So few players can play the way he plays, get us up the field. Yes, we've got a lot of attacking options, but I want to be building our attack around this guy next season. Tommy Watson, yes, coming in, competing on that left-hand side. Perhaps a little bit similar in the mould to Kaoru Mitoma, but, arguably one of our best ever players, Kaoru Mitoma, for the price, for the quality that he brings. We've got to try and do everything we can to keep him. There's not a chance we're going to loan him, and we're only going to sell him if it's against our will. Right, for Facundo Buonanotte, let's move on to him. Obviously had a loan at Leicester last season. Looked like one of their best players at times in a very, very poor Leicester side. But, for his development, had another season of Premier League football, which is something really to be proud of and is something that's very, very beneficial to him. I would really like to see him come back into our side and compete for places in that attack. I'll be interested to see how that looks. I think one of him and maybe Enciso will have to go, but if it were me, I probably would keep Buonanotte out of the two of them. I think you can tell that he's a Premier League player. You can tell he's maybe a bit more of a team player, and I'd be really excited to see him in our side next season. On that note, Julio Enciso, unpopular opinion, I think there was a time where he was one of our most prodigious talents. However, I think given what's going on at the moment and perhaps the money we can get for him and the depth that we have, maybe another loan. But ultimately, I think if we can get good money for him, I probably would sell Julio Enciso. I really like the player. But within, there's interest from Porto, there's interest from, other European sides. I think, Fabian Hurzeler has perhaps not seen enough of him. And I think with the amount of attacking options that we have, I probably would see that as a good opportunity to make money. Look, if we had Estupiñán, Enciso and Pedro leave this summer, I think that's quite a good result in terms of the options that we'd be left with and not our key players essentially leaving, apart from maybe someone like João Pedro. So for me, I would say probably on the balance of things, sell Julio Enciso. Malik Yacoulé, I would love to see him in this side. I will keep him. I think, it might be that at the end of, the window, we see an opportunity come up for him to go out on loan. But I think I'd love to see him in pre-season and give him an opportunity to be kept and be in around that first team squad next season. Obviously, he looked like a player who was absolutely brilliant in the Champions League, particularly doing so well in Austria. Dynamic, can get about the pitch, a bit like a mini Kante, I think he is. Someone who covers so much ground, he can tackle, he can play the football as well. I'd love to see him play. The only difficulty is we've got a lot of central midfield options next season. Maybe it will see something like Jack Hinshelwood moving to right wing back. That's not beyond the realms of possibility if we need to bring someone like him into the side. But I'd love to keep him next season. Let's move on to João Pedro. I would love to keep João Pedro. I genuinely would love to keep João Pedro. I'm in a bit of a different camp to I think a lot of people, where I do really see the benefits of João Pedro. I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's got, he is one of our best players, one of our best goal scorers. I think a lot of fans get quite frustrated with João Pedro, but I still see a player who I think he makes us better. I think he is one of our, if not best attackers. Newcastle showing interest in him. I could see why that would be a great move for them, for him. Champions League football for him. I think he would really improve Newcastle. He can play across the front line, compete with Isak for that number 9 position. But I think on the balance of things, you see the way things have gone in terms of the kind of culture aspect of him and the team, and him clearly kind of breaking some rules within the squad. I think if the club maybe, saw an opportunity to make big money on him, they probably would. And I think on the balance of things, I think João Pedro is a sale that I would be prepared to make and happy to make. Final 2 out of the players that we've got. Let's go with Valentin Barker, a player who did so well at Strasbourg last season, and there's so much confusion around him. I'll be honest, I can't definitively say whether he will be a player with us on July the 1st. All the talk, all the assumption was that it was a loan with an obligation to buy, irrespective of what happened with him. And we'd be selling him for around 10 million quid to Strasbourg. He'd be part of the Blue Co, Chelsea wider group that also owns Strasbourg. But it looks like he might be coming back for pre-season. I would love to keep him. I think he would be perfect, particularly if we're going to lose someone like Pervis Estupiñán. He would be perfect for playing that left wing-back slot. It gives us so much more option with Ferdi Kadioglu also being able to play left or right. He looks like a player who can get up and down. He's got brilliant touch, great ball into the box, energetic, fantastically technical. You saw him working under Liam Rosenior last season, a player who was lauded by the Strasbourg fans and Liam Rosenior loving him as well. I would love to keep him. If we could, I would love to try and keep him next season. The reports are perhaps his attitude's not brilliant. I'd be interested to kind of dig into that a little bit more and see what the truth is around that. But I think if I had the choice and the contract allowed it, I would be keeping him next season. And finally, let's move on to Evan Ferguson. Really difficult for Evan Ferguson. Obviously burst on the scene a few years ago. This is probably one of the toughest choices I'd have to make with him. But hasn't been able to kick on with the the quality that he came into this side in the Premier League and showed. Obviously struggled with that West Ham loan, has struggled in the first half of last season with injuries as well. I think selling him might happen this summer. I think it might happen. Everton showing interest, for example. But he didn't light up the Premier League, and maybe a Championship loan would be best for him. If it were me, I'd love to keep him. In general, on the books at this club, I would love to keep him. However, I don't think he will be able to get into this side next season with all of the options that we have. I think I will say loan. However, I do want to see him in pre-season. I want to see him, Welbeck, Kostelas, Seamas, fighting for that number 9 central striker position in that front three, forgetting all the wingers and stuff. I'd love to see those 4 fighting for that position. And we can make an assessment for him. If he comes back fit and firing after a strong summer, I would really, really welcome that. So generally for me, it's a keep with Evan Ferguson. However, I think what is maybe looking more likely is that we give him another season-long loan out of the club and then assess things in a year's time with him. So yeah, that is everyone. I feel like generally, if I'm looking at it, the majority of the squad I have kept, with probably a third of the squad being sold or loaned, and I think that's probably about right. I think in terms of the squad that we've got and the players we've brought in, you've got to forget there's kind of 3-4 players on top of this that we've brought in. That gives us a 3, 6, 9, 12, 24. That's a 26-man squad in the keep section. Plus another kind of 4 or 5 players. That's a kind of 30-man squad. So even from those players that I've got there, we probably really need to trim that down again and get rid of another 5 of them. So it is going to be difficult. We've still got a lot of players, but I think on balance with the players that I've sold and loaned, I do feel happy with that. There's a mix of players who put some excellent service in for the club, some young players who need a bit more experience, some players who we can get a bit of money out of for maybe, not record sales, but kind of strong sales in terms of what we could get for them. So yeah, I feel quite happy with that. I don't think I've made any crazy shouts. I've not sold anyone I don't think who would be a crazy, ridiculous shout. I've not kept anyone who I think the fans would, completely disagree with on the whole. I'd love to know your opinion. Do you think I've made any crazy shouts here? Do you think I've got anything completely wrong? Let me know in the comments below, and I would love to hear your feedback. As always, thank you so much for watching this video. If you haven't already, if you are part of the 75% of people watching my videos who haven't subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button that pops up on the end screen or just below you as you're watching this now. It really means a lot to me. It helps me more than you know. I appreciate it so much. I will see you on the next one in a few days' time. And as always, up the Albion.